Welcome back to the deep dive. I uh, I have to admit, when I first called up the source material for today, I had a pretty visceral reaction. I actually winced.
Oh, I can guess why.
Yeah,
It's the title, isn't it?
it is 100% the title. The piece is called "Why Would Women Let Men Be More Powerful Than Them?" And my immediate thought was, excuse me, let.
Right, like it's just a
Like it's a casual choice.
hmm.
Like deciding to let someone else drive the car, it felt really sharp, maybe even a little victim blaming.
It's incredibly provocative, and honestly, if you didn't have that reaction, you probably weren't paying attention. It sounds like the author is asking, hey, why are you allowing this to happen to you?
Exactly.
But that reaction, that feeling of it being jarring is exactly what the text uses as a hook.
Yeah, because once I actually started reading, I realized the author pulls a total bait and switch.
Mhm.
They aren't asking that question to blame anyone. They're asking it to, you know, completely dismantle our understanding of how power even works.
Precisely. And that's really the mission of this deep dive. We are not here to rehash the standard battle of the sexist stuff you see on social media.
Oh, please, now.
Right? The whole men are this way, women are that way argument. The text is trying to do something much more ambitious. It's arguing that power isn't a transaction.
Mm-hmm.
It's not something you just hand over in a single moment of weakness. It argues that power is accumulated, it's structural,
Yeah.
and most importantly, it's normalized over time.
Normalized. That word does a lot of heavy lifting here.
Mhm.
So, to really get into this, the source material breaks it down into two distinct lenses for us to look through.
Yep.
We've got the structural, which they compare to the hardware of society.
Yeah.
And then we have the psychological, which is like the software running in our heads.
I love that framing, hardware and software. Because the big argument here is that you cannot understand the software why someone might act submissive or deferential without understanding the hardware that was literally built to run it.
Okay, so let's look at the hardware first, the structural side. The text opens with this assertion that power is rarely handed over in a single moment. It says power accumulates.
Right.
Break that down for us. What does accumulation actually look like in the real world?
Well, think about how we usually view power dynamics. We take a snapshot. We see a husband making the final call on a big house purchase, or maybe a male CEO interrupting a female executive in a boardroom.
And we judge that specific moment.
Exactly. We think, why didn't she speak up? But the source is saying that dynamic didn't start in that meeting. It's the result of a very long, slow process. The text lists what I call the big five forces that stack the deck long before anyone even walks into that room.
Okay, let's go through these because this list is super comprehensive. The big five.
The first, and honestly the most foundational, is economic control. Money is leverage, plain and simple.
Yeah, and this one seems obvious, but I think we forget the history. It wasn't that long ago, we're talking the 1970s in the U.S., that woman couldn't even get a credit card without a male cosigner.
Precisely. And that is the accumulation part. If you have centuries where one group holds the resources and the other group has to ask for resources,
You're just fundamentally dependent.
it creates a dependency that is baked right into the system. If you can't buy a house or open a bank account or earn a comparable wage, your ability to say no to the person who can do those things is mathematically close to zero.
Wow,
It's not a choice, it's a cage.
that is a terrifying image.
Yeah.
But okay, so that's number one. What's the second force?
Physical force. And the text doesn't shy away from this at all. The threat or the reality of physical dominance shifts the power balance before a single word is even spoken.
This feels like the elephant in the room in so many negotiations. It changes the baseline entirely.
It really does.
If one person can physically overpower the other,
Yeah.
every interaction has this underlying hum of, I need to be careful.
Right. It creates a safety calculation that just runs in the background constantly.
Yeah.
Then you have the third and fourth forces, which are legal systems and cultural narratives. These are the stories and the rules we live by. Who do the laws protect? And just as importantly, who do the stories say should be in charge?
So this is where media and religion come in, right? Because the text mentions this idea of reinforcement.
It does. Think about it. If every movie you watched growing up, every sermon you heard, every family dinner you attended featured male authority as the default, that repetition wired your brain.
Yeah.
It shapes your baseline expectation of what leadership looks like.
It's the water we swim in. You don't even notice it's wet because it's just everywhere.
Exactly. And the fifth force is psychological conditioning, which acts as the glue holding all the other four together. This creates what the source calls embedded imbalance.
Embedded imbalance,
Yeah.
yeah. When institutions reward one group repeatedly, The imbalance becomes embedded.
Yeah.
It's no longer just a series of individual choices.
So, to go back to that jarring title, why would she let him? The answer from the hardware side is quite literally, she didn't let him.
No, she didn't. The economy, the law, the culture, the threat of violence, all of that set the stage before she even walked into the room.
Right, the default setting was already installed.
But, and this is where the deep dive gets really interesting to me, the text pivots here. It says, okay, the structure is rigged, we get that,
Mm-hmm.
but we still have agency. We still make choices. So we have to look at the software. The text asks a really hard question. Why do women defer power even when they don't have to?
And this is the psychological piece. Now, we have to be super careful here not to slide back into victim blaming.
Right.
Because the text is very clear that deference is often a completely rational response to the environment. It lists specific reasons, like safety, survival, and social norms.
Let's talk about the social norms part, specifically relational harmony. That term jumped out at me. I think a lot of you listening will instantly identify with this.
Oh, absolutely.
The idea that keeping the peace is somehow more important than being right or being heard.
It's huge. We are social creatures. But for women specifically, the source argues that assertiveness is often actively punished.
Yeah.
If a man flips a table in a meeting, he's passionate. If a woman raises her voice, she's difficult. Or emotional.
Or hysterical. That's the classic one.
Right. So you learn very quickly that the path of least resistance and the path that keeps you socially safe is to prioritize the relationship over the conflict. You prioritize harmony over dominance.
It's just learned behavior. Don't rock the boat.
Exactly. And it links directly to what the text calls internalized beliefs. This is the really deep-seated stuff. The source argues that if a woman believes her voice is inherently less valuable, or if she's been taught that her value comes from being desirable to men, she will unconsciously minimize herself.
Man, there's a quote in the source that really stuck with me on this. It said, if she equates worth with desirability rather than autonomy, she may trade influence for validation.
That is such a critical distinction. Desirability versus autonomy. If your internal map says, I am safe and good only when I'm desired, then you will trade your power to maintain that desirability. You give up influence just to get a pat on the head.
Oof, pat on the head. That is brutal, but man, is it accurate.
It is. And that actually brings us to the most controversial part of the text, I think. The author asks, is power being surrendered from fear, or is it being chosen from preference? Or is it a strategy?
Okay, we definitely need to stop here, because when I read this part about strategy, I literally wrote, wait, what? In the margins.
I am not surprised.
The text suggests that letting someone appear more powerful can actually be a smart move.
Yes, it does.
But isn't that just, I don't know, manipulation? Or faking it? It sounds like we're telling women, hey, just stroke his ego and you'll get what you want. That feels so regressive.
I totally get that reaction. It feels icky, right? Like we're back in the 1950s giving advice on how to catch a husband in some magazine.
Yes, exactly.
But let's look at it through the lens of survival that the text is using. If you are operating in a system, that hardware we talked about earlier, that actively punishes you for being assertive, what are your actual options?
I guess you either fight the system and get punished, or you find a workaround.
Exactly. You find a workaround. The text argues that sometimes the smartest move, the move that keeps you physically safe or ensures your financial survival, is to let the other person feel like they are in charge.
Huh.
It's not about feeding his ego because you care about his feelings. It's about feeding his ego because it disarms the threat.
Okay, so it's not submission at all. It's camouflage.
That's a great way to put it. It's strategic deference. You are navigating a minefield. If stepping on a mine blows you up, you step around it. That's not weakness, that's intelligence.
But there is a danger there, isn't there? I mean, if you spend your whole life faking deference, don't you eventually forget you're faking it?
That is the ultimate risk. And the text warns about this explicitly. It says the line between strategy and conditioning is very thin.
Yeah.
Are you doing it because you chose to, as a tactic? Or are you doing it because you're terrified? The action looks exactly the same on the outside. You're nodding and smiling, but the internal reality is completely different.
Which perfectly leads into how the text differentiates between leadership and dominance. Because I think we often conflate the two in these discussions.
We really do.
We see a guy leading something and instantly think, patriarchy. But the source argues that leadership is actually necessary.
Right. Leadership and dominance are not synonyms. In a healthy relationship, or a healthy team for that matter, leadership is fluid. It shifts back and forth.
It's based on who actually knows what they're doing.
Exactly. The text lists the drivers of healthy leadership: skill, personality, interest, temperament. If you are amazing at logistics and I'm great at big picture strategy, you absolutely should lead the logistics. That isn't oppression. That's just efficiency.
So if my partner handles the investments because he's an accountant and I hate math, that's not me letting him be powerful. That's just a smart division of labor.
Correct. Provided, and this is the crucial key from the source, provided there is mutual consent and accountability.
And the ability to say no.
Yes. The ability
Yeah.
to say no is the ultimate litmus test. The text gives us markers of imbalance to watch out for. Imbalance persists where self-worth is low, where dependency is high, and crucially, where systems punish dissent.
Punish dissent.
If you can't disagree without paying a price, that is not leadership. That is dominance.
If you can't disagree without paying a price.
Yeah.
That's the bumper sticker right there. Okay, so we've looked at the structural obstacles, which are heavy, and we've analyzed the psychological traps.
Yeah.
But the text doesn't end on a downer, which I appreciated. It actually pivots to something pretty hopeful.
It does. It reminds us that power is not fixed. Just because the hardware was built a certain way doesn't mean we can't hack the software.
I love that. And it lists specific levers of change, things that actually shift power dynamics in the real world. And the first one is the one we touched on earlier, money.
Economic independence. It is the foundation. We can talk about mindset all day long, but if you literally cannot afford to pay your own rent, your leverage is incredibly limited.
Yeah.
The text says economic independence shifts power because it removes the survival necessity from the equation,
It gives you walkaway power.
which is the ultimate power. If you don't need the partnership for food and shelter, the dynamic automatically moves from dependency to choice.
The next lever is more internal, emotional regulation. How exactly does staying calm shift power?
Think about a heated argument. If one person can bait the other into exploding or crying, who is actually in control of that interaction?
The person doing the baiting, for sure.
Right. The person who loses control gives away their power. The text argues that emotional regulation, your ability to stay grounded when pressured, keeps you in the negotiation. You don't default to submission and you don't default to explosion. You just stay present.
And that links right into boundary enforcement, which, sounds a bit like therapy speak. But in this context, it's really about teaching people how to treat you.
It is. A boundary is simply a clear definition of what you will and will not accept. If you enforce it, meaning if you actually follow through with consequences, you shift the power. But you can only do that if you have competence.
Explain that link. Competence and boundaries.
Well, competence builds internal security. If I know I am good at my job or I know I am a capable human being, I don't need your validation to feel okay. My worth isn't outsourced to you.
Okay, I see.
That internal security allows me to set a boundary because I'm not terrified of you leaving or rejecting me.
This all leads to a concept the text introduces near the very end.
Yeah.
It uses a really specific word to describe the ultimate goal here. It's not dominance, it's coherence.
Yes. Coherent.
Now, I want to pause on this word because it sounds a bit abstract.
Yeah.
What does the author actually mean by coherence in the context of power dynamics?
It's a great term. Think of coherence as alignment. It means your outsides match your insides.
Give me an example of that in action.
Okay, incoherence is when you are smiling and nodding at your boss, saying, yes, absolutely, I can work late on Friday. But your stomach is in absolute knots and your inner voice is screaming, no way, this is unfair, I hate this.
I think we've all been there.
Right, that split between your inside and outside, that is a loss of power. You are fragmented.
Okay, so coherence is when the no on the inside becomes a no on the outside.
Exactly. It's about agency. The goal isn't for women to just flip the script and start dominating men.
Right.
The text explicitly says I would just be the exact same problem with a different face. The goal is for women to have the agency to act in alignment with their own truth, to be coherent.
So you aren't fighting a war against men. You're fighting a war against what?
Insecurity and coercion. The text reframes the conflict beautifully, I think. It's not male versus female. It is insecurity versus self-trust. It is coercion versus consent.
I love that. It takes it totally out of that gender war cage match and puts it into a framework of just human maturity.
It does. It argues that true strength isn't about overpowering someone else. It's about being internally secure enough that you don't need to overpower them and you don't need to submit to them either.
And what happens to the relationship when you actually reach that state of coherence?
You have two choices at that point. You either collaborate, truly collaborate as equals, or you withdraw.
Collaborate or withdraw?
That is real power. The ability to withdraw implies you aren't trapped. And if you choose to stay, it implies you genuinely want to be there. It moves the dynamic from power hoarded, which is unstable and relies entirely on fear, to power shared, which is stable.
So we started this deep dive with a title that made me want to throw my phone across the room. Why would women let men be more powerful? And we've arrived at a pretty complex answer.
It is very complex. It's not just, oh, because they're weak. It's a mix of structural force, the history of money and laws. It's survival instinct, staying safe in a dangerous world. And yes, sometimes it is a choice, a strategy.
But the big takeaway for me is that letting isn't a permanent state.
No. The text literally says, no one lets imbalance forever without reason. When autonomy strengthens, when you get that economic independence, that emotional regulation, that coherence, the imbalance has to shift. It simply can't survive.
And that's the shift we want to see. From power that is assumed to power that is negotiated.
Negotiated is the key word. Negotiation implies two active participants. Hierarchy implies one active participant and one silent one.
So here's the thought we want to leave you with today, and we want you to actually do this. Take a look at the power dynamics in your own life, whether that is at work with your boss, at home with your partner, or even just within your friend group.
Just observe it. Don't judge it immediately. And ask yourself this question from the text. Is the power dynamic here based on hierarchy, or is it based on negotiation?
Because as the text reminds us, one is assumed and the other is earned. And frankly, the earned version is the only one worth having.
I couldn't agree more.
Thanks for diving in with us today. This was a heavy one, but I think a really necessary one. We'll see you next time.